Quick question. How many times have you deleted Instagram, felt proud for exactly 3 days, then reinstalled it because you needed it for work? Yeah, me too. I tried to quit social media multiple times. It didn't work. But what I discovered instead was way more powerful. How to turn my phone into a cat. By the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly why willpower fails when it comes to social media. Why deleting apps for mental health breaks backfires spectacularly. And you'll walk away with a 3-step plan I reverse engineered from 2 books plus 2 types of apps that completely game-changed my detox approach. But first, you need to know about Mr. Automatic, my furry roommate who did something so bizarre and perplexing that it led to 3 possible life paths. Learn an ancient focus secret, embrace digital hermit life, or keep pretending productivity content addiction is sustainable. But first, let me tell you about the day I realized I'd been turned into a productivity content addict. I was helping my mom research a restaurant safety issue, and somehow 3 hours later, I found myself sitting in that exact same restaurant, staring at their menu, only then remembering we were supposed to be avoiding this place because of the hygiene concerns I'd completely forgotten to research. But let me back up and tell you how this digital disaster actually started. It all began on a Tuesday that was aggressively productive until it wasn't. I had my laptop open, my coffee steaming, and a project deadline that was perfectly manageable. I was going to crush this day, maybe even finish early and feel like a functioning Neanderthal for once. I sat down, cracked my knuckles, opened my laptop, and then ping, a text from my mom asking if I'd seen the news about that restaurant we were planning to visit next week. Apparently there was some hygiene issue. She wanted to know if we should pick somewhere else. So I opened Instagram to check the restaurant's latest posts, see if they'd addressed it. While I was there, I figured I'd share the story to my close friends so they knew too. But then I noticed this productivity influencer had posted about morning routines, and since I was trying to optimize mine, 3 hours later, I was sitting in that same restaurant, clutching my phone like evidence of a crime I'd committed against myself, feeling like I was the main character in a productivity horror movie where the villain was my own thumb. I couldn't even explain where the time went. 1 minute I was checking on a restaurant. The next, I was deep in a rabbit hole about productivity hacks, watching TikToks about morning routines, and somehow ending up on LinkedIn reading about people my age who were apparently running companies while I was watching videos about running companies. There's being distracted, and then there's productivity content addiction while being completely unproductive distracted. That Tuesday, I met the second kind. What's worse, I stumbled upon my own screen time report that stopped me cold. 6 hours, 47 minutes, social media, today. I stared at it, refreshed the app, stared again. That number hit me harder than discovering I've ordered a menu item from a potentially problematic restaurant. It didn't just shake up how I viewed social media, it cracked open a whole new way of thinking about my increasingly ridiculous relationship with my own attention. I wasn't digitally overwhelmed or easily distracted. I was one of the people whose brain had been completely hijacked, and I'd been calling it staying informed. I wasn't supposed to be in this situation. I had tried digital detoxes, I'd delete apps, I'd even bought one of those physical timer locks that hold your phone hostage for set periods, which I promptly figured out how to override during a social media emergency involving a celebrity breakup that definitely required my immediate attention. But actually staying off the platforms, that's a different beast. Look, most of my scrolling wasn't even mindless junk. I was learning. I'd spend hours watching productivity gurus explain morning routines, fitness influencers breaking down workout techniques, business coaches sharing the one habit that changed everything. It felt productive, educational even. But then, somehow, I'm not even sure how, I'd blink and suddenly I was deep in a rabbit hole about what celebrities eat for breakfast, watching a raccoon steal someone's sandwich, and getting genuinely invested in a 47-part series about a woman who found a secret room in her house. You start the day all high and mighty. Today I'm going to smash my goals and will not consume any distracting content. And then suddenly you've blacked out and there are tabs open about why pineapple belongs on pizza, a saved folder called Life Hacks I'll Never Use, and you somehow know way too much about a TikTok drama between people you've never heard of. The workday is still very much alive, but my brain is just craving for the next pixie dust sprinkle. And worse, scrolling had become my default response to everything. Waiting for the elevator? Scroll. Commercial break? Scroll. Friend is 2 minutes late? Scroll. That awkward moment when the microwave is heating up your food? You guessed it, scroll. It was like I'd trained my brain that any moment of potential boredom must be immediately filled with tiny dopamine hits from my pocket-sized entertainment machine. Now, during this whole existential crisis about my attention span, I had been living with what I can only describe as the world's most judgmental productivity coach. Except this coach had fur, four legs, and an alarming habit of knocking things off tables when displeased. His name is Mr. Automatic. We call him that because everything he does seems to happen without deliberation, without overthinking, without the endless internal debate that plagues literally every decision I make. He wants food? He goes to the food bowl. He's tired? He sleeps? He sees a bird? He watches it with the focus of a sniper. One particular afternoon, while I was in the middle of another productive scrolling session, I noticed Mr. Automatic had positioned himself by the living room window. Not unusual, he likes his window perch. But this time was different. He was completely still, locked onto something outside. I glanced over casually, expecting to see him in his typical lazy cat pose. Instead, what I witnessed was 26 minutes. I timed it because I'm that person now. So 26 minutes of absolutely unwavering focus. No tail flicking, no looking around, no sudden interest in the laser pointer I was absent-mindedly waving around. Here was this cat demonstrating perfect, sustained attention, single-tasking mastery, and environmental awareness, all rolled into one furry package. Meanwhile, I couldn't even maintain focus long enough to finish reading a caption without making the next scroll. He was exhibiting every principle I'd been consuming content about but never actually practicing: complete present moment awareness, resistance to distraction, and the ability to find genuine engagement with real-world stimuli instead of artificial digital candy. Naturally, as someone whose attention span had apparently been surgically replaced with a gnat's attention span, I had to interrupt his focus by taking a photo of him focusing, because irony was apparently the theme of my entire existence. But watching him made me realize something. I had three realistic options ahead of me. 1. I could try to learn whatever this cat intuitively understood about attention and focus. 2. I could invest in a flip phone and embrace the hermit lifestyle my digital habits were already preparing me for. 3. I could continue pretending that watching productivity content while being completely unproductive was somehow a sustainable life strategy. That ridiculous moment with the cat and the window planted a seed. What if I could build a system that protected my attention instead of constantly battling for it? Around that time, I stumbled on two books that completely changed my perspective on focus, dopamine, and why our brains seem to work against us when it comes to sustained attention. The first author was Cal Newport, a computer science professor at Georgetown. Now, Newport had been studying something that fascinated me. Why do some people seem to effortlessly focus for hours, while others, like me, can barely make it through a paragraph without checking their phone? He discovered that when you switch from task A to task B, something interesting happens in your brain. Let's say you're writing a report, then you quickly check Instagram, then go back to writing. You might think you're fully back on the report, but neurologically, part of your attention is still stuck on Instagram. Your brain is still processing that funny meme, wondering about the comments you saw, maybe thinking about what to post next. This lingering mental residue from the previous task makes it nearly impossible to give your full cognitive power to what you're trying to focus on. Newport calls this attention residue, and it explained why I could never seem to get back into deep focus after just checking social media. In Digital Minimalism, Newport shows us that the solution isn't willpower, it's environmental design. He argues that we need to restructure our digital lives completely, not just try harder to resist. The book lays out specific strategies for doing a full digital declutter and rebuilding your relationship with technology from scratch. But understanding attention residue was just the beginning. The second book revealed something even more fundamental about what was happening in my brain. Dr. Anna Lemke is a psychiatrist and addiction specialist at Stanford. She'd been studying people with severe addictions, drugs, alcohol, gambling, when she started noticing something disturbing. More and more of her patients weren't coming in for substance abuse. They were coming in because they couldn't stop using their phones. Lemke discovered that social media platforms trigger the exact same neurochemical pathways as traditional addictions. Every time you get a like, a comment, or even just scroll to see new content, your brain releases a small hit of dopamine, the same neurotransmitter involved in cocaine addiction. But here's where it gets really concerning. Dopamine isn't actually about pleasure, it's about anticipation. It's your brain's way of saying something good might happen if you keep doing this. And social media apps are designed to give you just enough reward to keep you hooked, but never quite enough to feel satisfied. The more dopamine hits you get, the more your brain adapts, requiring bigger hits just to feel normal. This is why checking your phone once never feels like enough. Your brain literally needs more stimulation to achieve the same level of satisfaction. In Dopamine Nation, Lemke explains how to reset your dopamine system and regain control over these hijacked reward pathways. She provides practical strategies for doing what she calls a dopamine fast and rebuilding healthier relationships with technology. Armed with this knowledge, I realized I wasn't fighting a lack of willpower. I was fighting against apps designed by teams of neuroscientists whose entire job was to make them irresistible. So I stopped trying to resist and started redesigning my entire digital environment. Armed with this new understanding, I knew I needed to fight fire with fire. If my phone was designed to hijack my attention, I needed to redesign it to protect my attention instead. The first problem was obvious. Every time I picked up my phone, those gorgeous, colorful app icons practically screaming for my attention. Steve Jobs famously said he wanted iPhone app icons to be so beautiful you'd want to lick them. Well, mission accomplished, Steve. I was basically licking my way through social media all day, every day. I needed the complete opposite experience. I wanted my phone to look so boring that I'd only use it when I actually needed it. That's when I discovered something called the Minimalist Phone app. Instead of those glossy, seductive icons, this app turns your entire home screen into plain text on a black background. TikTok becomes just TikTok. No colors, no graphics, no visual candy trying to seduce your eyeballs. Instagram becomes just the word Instagram in white text. But here's where it gets even better. You can actually change the app names. I renamed them all to things like Time Vampire, Productivity Killer, and Attention Destroyer. That way I'd remember the toll these apps would take on my time. Plus, since they all shared similarly discouraging names, I couldn't really tell which was which, so getting to the app I wanted became quite an annoying experience. The psychological difference was immediate and weird. Instead of seeing this beautiful grid of potential entertainment, I was looking at a ridiculous list of warnings. It was like swapping a candy store display for a library card catalog filled with cautionary tales. But the real genius was in how it organized everything. You could only put a few essential apps on the main screen, your favorites. Everything else got buried alphabetically. So if I wanted to check one of my newly renamed brain drain apps, I couldn't just tap a pretty icon. I had to either scroll through an alphabetical list or actually type the discouraging name into a search bar. This created what the research calls friction, small barriers that give your rational brain time to ask, wait, do I actually need to waste time on Attention Destroyer right now? The first day with my new boring phone was uncomfortable. I kept reaching for it and then just staring at this plain black screen with depressing app names, feeling like I was using a digital detox device from some dystopian future. But that discomfort was the point. My phone was no longer optimized for mindless scrolling. It was optimized for intentional use. But I still had a problem. Even with the boring interface and discouraging names, once I did manage to open one of these apps, I'd still fall down rabbit holes. I needed something stronger for those moments when my willpower was basically on vacation. That's where I found this app called Freedom. It's like having a strict parent for your phone, except you set the rules. You can block specific apps, block entire categories of websites, even block your internet connection completely if needed. The game changer feature was called locked mode. On days when I knew my self-control was running on empty, I could start a blocking session and literally lock myself out of changing it. Even if future me desperately wanted to check social media, the app would basically say, nope, past you said no, and past you is in charge here. I remember the first time I tried to override it during a particularly boring Tuesday afternoon. I clicked on what used to be Instagram, now called Attention Destroyer, got a message saying it was blocked for another 2 hours, and tried every possible way to disable it. The app just sat there, unmoved by my digital tantrum. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was learning focus from a cat, and now teaching that same focus to my phone. Mr. Automatic never needed an app to stay focused. He just had natural boundaries. Now my phone had boundaries too. But here's the twist that actually made me laugh out loud. I realized I'd essentially turned my smartphone into Mr. Automatic. Think about it. He never responded to distractions unless they were genuinely important, like the sound of his food bowl. He had his preferred apps, the window, his food station, his favorite nap spots, easily accessible, while everything else required deliberate effort to access. And just like Mr. Automatic would ignore my attempts to distract him during his focused window sessions, my phone was now ignoring my attempts to distract myself during my focused work sessions. I'd basically given my phone a digital cat personality. It was selective about what deserved attention, completely unmoved by my impulses, and stubbornly committed to whatever task it was supposed to be supporting. The best part? Sometimes when Freedom would block me from accessing Brain Drain, formerly TikTok, I'd actually find myself looking over at Mr. Automatic, and I swear he'd give me this look that seemed to say, finally, you're getting it. After about a week of using both apps together, something strange started happening. Instead of feeling restricted, I felt lighter. The constant low-level anxiety of what am I missing online started fading. I could sit through entire meals, entire conversations, entire work sessions without that nagging urge to check my phone. In the end, I learned that the real breakthrough isn't in defeating your digital urges through sheer willpower. It's in redesigning your environment so that focused attention becomes as automatic as Mr. Automatic's bird watching sessions. Core mindset shifts. 1. Your phone should serve you, not seduce you. Just like Mr. Automatic only pays attention to things that actually matter to him, your phone should be designed to only surface what actually deserves your attention. Those beautiful, lickable app icons that Steve Jobs was so proud of, they're working against you. Make your digital environment as boring and intentional as possible. 2. Friction is your friend. Dr. Anna Lemke talks about how addiction thrives on immediate access. The faster you can get your dopamine hit, the stronger the addiction becomes. By adding friction, renaming apps to attention destroyer, burying them in alphabetical lists, using locked blocking sessions, you give your rational brain time to ask, do I actually want to do this right now? 3. Environment beats willpower every time. Cal Newport's research on attention residue shows us that our brains are terrible at switching between tasks. Instead of fighting this limitation, design around it. Create phone-free zones, use blocking apps, make distraction require effort. Your future distracted self will thank your current intentional self. The 3-step system you can use today. 1. Make your phone boring. Download something like Minimalist Phone or just move all social media apps off your home screen and into a folder buried somewhere annoying. Rename them to reflect their true cost: attention destroyer, productivity killer, life waster. If you're feeling really committed, change them all to the same discouraging name so you can't tell which is which. 2. Add strategic friction. Use apps like Freedom to block your biggest time wasters during your most important work hours. Set up locked mode sessions that your future impulsive self can't override. Create phone-free physical zones. Start with just your bedroom or dining table and expand from there. 3. Replace the pixie dust sprinkle. Remember how I used to crave that next hit of social media stimulation? You need to replace that habit with something else. Keep a book nearby, call a friend, go for a walk, pet your cat. Nature abhors a vacuum. Fill the scrolling time with something that actually adds to your life. The goal isn't to become a digital hermit living in a flip phone fantasy. It's to make your phone as selective about deserving attention as Mr. Automatic is about his bird watching. That cat doesn't need willpower to ignore distractions. He just naturally focuses on what matters to him. Your phone can work the same way. And about those 3 realistic options I faced while watching Mr. Automatic demonstrate perfect focus? Well, I'm happy to report that I learned to focus like him, not perfectly, but consistently enough that I can actually complete projects without falling into productivity content rabbit holes. I kept the boring phone setup. I kept the app names that remind me of their true cost. I kept using Freedom to block Time Vampire and Attention Destroyer during my deep work sessions. But the more I watched Mr. Automatic, the more I realized there was something else going on. One morning, I noticed something that completely reframed everything. My dad walking by the living room window right as Mr. Automatic settled into his perch and gently tapping the glass to make sure the birds outside were visible and active. This had been happening for weeks, but I'd never connected the dots. Eventually, I confronted him. Dad, have you been timing your bird feeder fills with Mr. Automatic's window schedule? He smiled, a little sheepish. That cat gets anxious when there's nothing interesting to focus on. I figured if I'm going to fill the feeders anyway, might as well make sure there's something worthwhile for him to watch. He focuses better when there's actual substance to pay attention to. That moment hit me harder than discovering I'd been mispronouncing entrepreneur all those years. Here was my dad, quietly creating the conditions for Mr. Automatic's focus to flourish. He wasn't trying to teach the cat discipline or willpower. He was just making sure there was always something meaningful competing for attention instead of letting boredom win. And suddenly, I understood something profound. Maybe my digital detox wasn't just about what I removed from my environment. Maybe it was about what I chose to fill that space with, and who was helping me create conditions where focus could happen naturally. My dad wasn't trying to teach me about attention and technology. He was just making sure Mr. Automatic had something genuinely worth focusing on. Sometimes the systems that transform us aren't just the apps we delete or the boundaries we create. They're the people who care enough to fill our environment with things that actually deserve our attention. Maybe the real digital minimalism isn't about having less. It's about being more selective about what gets to compete for the most valuable thing we have, our focus. If this helped you turn your phone into cat, hit subscribe. Next week, we're talking about why every productivity system you've tried has failed and what Mr. Automatic taught me about building habits that actually stick. See you in the next one.